Well, congressional Republicans are doing what they do best. No, not developing exciting new ways to be racist in public without using slurs. No, I'm talking about screwing over millions of hardworking Americans in favor of the ultra-rich. That old chestnut. They passed a new budget resolution that would gut Medicaid and food stamps to cover over $1 trillion in tax cuts for the 1%. And a lot of conservatives online are celebrating this, which is weird to me because they can't all be part of the 1% on account of, how percentages work and stuff. So I don't understand what y'all are happy about. And they might say, it's like, well, no, Trump already said he's going to take care of working people because there's not going to be any taxes on tips and overtime and stuff. All right, first, those things are like the governmental equivalent of working for a soulless corporation that'll write you up for attending the birth of your child. But sometimes on Fridays, they let us untuck our shirts and eat cold pizza, right? Comparatively speaking, those measures ain't shit. But more importantly, also, they ain't even doing those things. Those things ain't part of this budget resolution, so what are you happy about? Right? And they might say, well, still, they're balancing the budget, they're trimming government spending, and that's good for all of us. Well, not to get too professorial on you, but nuh-uh. It's going to increase the country's debt. How are you okay with that as a conservative? One Republican in Congress voted no on this. One, because he said it's going to increase our debt. And I just don't think that would be, fiscally responsible. To which his colleagues in the Republican Congress responded by making the jerk-off motion, saying, oh, is it not fiscally responsible, Tom? Hey, somebody call the zoo. Tell them one of their rhinos escaped, huh? And they all high-fived and gave each other another 6-day weekend. These people are not working to help you. Why are you cheering them on? All right, giving these rich people even more money is not going to work. You know how I know? Because we've been doing it for over 40 damn years. All right, like if the blessed urine of our betters was ever going to trickle down to us, I think we'd have felt a drop or two by now.
Friend of the show, Trae Crowder, puts it in terms that anyone should be able to understand. But even if you still don't, these MAGA politicians do a pretty good job of proving that they're trying to hide it from you.
How much would you like to see cut from Medicaid?
Well, there is zero mention of cutting Medicaid. There is zero mention of cutting Social Security because you can't. But it is, again, it's a balancing thing that we have $26 trillion in debt and growing. What you have is the savings by removing the fraud, abuse, right, and efficiency, and then you have the expenditures are the tax provisions, and the tax provisions do cost money, but we don't want to go in debt doing this. I mean, you have to recognize that $26 trillion. The reason why we're here is spending. Relax, full back on the spending and make sure we have a plan that we don't go in debt with the taxes provisions extending that, again, that costs money, and also the savings. We got to make sure they balance out. And that's what the argument is about. It's just a simple ledger sheet.
Ryan Zinke thought he could simply claim that there's zero plan to cut Medicaid because, like the rest of MAGA, he's used to just saying something that's flat out false without anyone pushing back with facts. But John Berman wouldn't let him off the hook.
But of course, you know that this blueprint did call on the Energy Committee, which oversees Medicare and Medicaid, that they have to cut at least, $880 billion. And plenty of people look at that and say, you can't get there without cutting Medicaid. So again, my direct question, which you didn't really address, is how much would you be willing to cut from Medicaid?
It's a balance. Again, it's a ledger sheet.
So if
we're going to do tax provisions,
you'd be willing to cut some?
then you have to make sure it's balanced. What we're going to do is not go in debt. Now, $850 billion is a goal. Again, it's over 10 years cycle. Do you think there's fraud in there at that scale? Likely there's pretty close, but there's also things we can do, like work requirements, like efficiency. Government is the last resort, it's not the first. So when you look at Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security is off because it's reconciliation, but it doesn't mean you can't make improvements on it. And get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse.
If you're going to tell your constituents, again, waste, fraud, and abuse is some. You're willing to look for some cuts in Medicaid, yes?
I will look at getting rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse. And again, Elon Musk has said it could be $1 trillion with a T, $1 trillion in waste, fraud, and abuse. But again, that's what he says. We have to confirm that's what it is. And if it is confirmed, then you can have the savings of it. So we're not going to cut benefits. What we're going to do is make it more efficiently. And if there's fraud, waste, and abuse, I know America doesn't want fraud, waste, and abuse. We see the abuse in USAID. We see it in programs. We see it in the spending. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, it's no different if there's fraud, waste, and abuse.
Claims of waste, fraud, and abuse based on what Elon, I'll make mistake, Musk says is fraud, waste, and abuse is these guys get out of jail free card when they're pressed with being honest. They still think that Musk has enough credibility with MAGA to use him as a way to refuse to explain. It's impossible for them to find $880 billion of fraud in Medicaid, which would leave them ready to cut services to pay for their billionaire tax breaks.
Are you afraid to actually talk about Medicaid reform?
We're not afraid to talk about anything. And the thing that was sort of another thing that happened, Joe, yesterday was that we had our first big meeting of the White House, and the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader and the Chairman of the Finance Committee and Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. And we started to put together a roadmap for what the next stage of reconciliation and then ultimately the big tax bill is going to look like. And so there was a lot of interesting conversation between the two. It was very collegial. I think some members of the House wanted to talk about those matters. I think that waste, fraud, abuse will be on the table for everything. And I think that there's probably that in every single program.
Yeah, this is why it's important for our media to begin to hold their feet to the fire. When he finally got cornered for refusing to say what they're doing, Kevin Hassett admitted that they're going after every single program. Now, he still wouldn't say the word Medicaid, even though waste, fraud, and abuse was tossed on as usual. But he said there's probably that in everything. I thought Elon was finding all that, so why probably? It's because they're making it up.
Thank you. So Republicans have been very adamant that Medicaid will not be gutted by this budget resolution. Where or what is the proof that Medicaid will be gutted by it, if there is any?
Republicans are lying to the American people about Medicaid. The Republican budget authorizes up to $880 billion in cuts to Medicaid by directing the Energy and Commerce Committee to find those spending cuts. Everybody knows who has had any connection to the congressional budget that if you are directing the Energy and Commerce Committee to find up to $880 billion, if not more, in spending cuts, that means Medicaid. I can't say it any other way. Republicans are lying. Prove me wrong. There's nothing more that I would like better, that we as House Democrats would like better, than for Republicans to prove us wrong, that they are not planning to cut Medicaid.
If they can prove Hakeem Jeffries wrong, it would be beneficial to Medicaid and the job losses that would come with it to avoid being picked apart. And it can be done as long as the final budget changes direction from the budget that House Republicans just passed that clearly showed on page 35 that the Committee on Energy and Commerce shall submit changes in laws within its jurisdiction, which includes Medicare and Medicaid, to reduce the deficit by not less than $880 billion for the period of fiscal years 2025 through 2034. It goes the same for agencies and departments that are already being taken down without this much of a discussion, because Musk is doing it without any oversight. They're attempting to steal from many parts of our government that don't have the level of fraud that they keep claiming exists to cover for the tax bill that they're planning. It's what Hassett said when he was talking about how everything is on the table. They just don't think you're listening or that you're paying attention.
We started to put together a roadmap for what the next stage of reconciliation and then ultimately the big tax bill is going to look like.
You are talking about the most massive transfer of wealth and resources from poor people and the middle class to the billionaires and corporations in the history of this country, right? You're talking about $880 billion of cuts to Medicaid. Now, I get it, like $880 billion, like what does that mean, right? That's a huge number. Nobody understands. Let me tell you what that means. That means that sick kids die in this country. That means that hospitals in depressed communities, in rural communities, close their doors. Right? That means that drug and addiction treatment centers disappear all across this country. That means that millions of working families who have insurance today, because by the way, 24% of Americans get their health care from Medicaid, they all of a sudden don't have their health care tomorrow. And for what? And for what? Because Elon Musk needs another $1 billion?